Stagecoach was the first of what they call the adult westerns or the psychological westerns. It took certain cliched characters like the drunken doctor, the hooker with a heart of gold, the unscrupulous banker, the good bad man, the gentleman with a dubious past, and mixed it into this unusually subversive recipe. It subverts polite and respectable society. The women that throw the hooker out, the women that reject the doctor, they're wrong. The banker, who is the most upright man in the stagecoach, supposedly, is a crook.
There's your receipt, $50,000. And remember this, what's good for the banks is good for the country.
It's very apropos for our society today. The script is very well constructed by Dudley Nichols and Ford. Ford knew how to do that. He knew how to take an ensemble piece and keep everybody's character alive and give everybody their moment. One of the most important things about Stagecoach to notice is how brilliant every single performance is and how well cast it is. And John Wayne is, you know, it made him a star, unquestionably. And Ford consciously sought out to make Wayne a star. I think Ford had planned to make Wayne a star way back when, in the early 30s. But Raoul Walsh trumped him by putting him in The Big Trail, a Western, which was a huge flop, even though it's quite a good picture, and Wayne is likable in it. He was relegated to C to Z Westerns and spent about 10 years on that treadmill until Ford rescued him against all odds, because nobody wanted John Wayne. They said, but you can see John Wayne in some cheap Western down the street for a quarter. Ford wouldn't hear about it. They wanted Gary Cooper. They said, take Joe McCrea even. But no, he saw John Wayne. And you can see right from the first time you see John Wayne with that quick dolly shot into a close-up of him, that Ford said, okay, this is going to be a big star. And he became the biggest star in pictures for, 30 or 40 years.
Hey, look, it's Ringo.
Yeah. Hello, kid.
Hello, Curly.
People have said that the way Ford made Wayne a star was by not letting him talk much. I said this to Ford, and Ford said he talks quite a bit. But what people meant was that Ford gives Wayne a lot of reaction shots, as he does Claire Trevor, who was the nominal star of the picture. And Wayne once said to me, he says, you know, people call me an action actor. I'm really a reaction actor. And this is well exemplified in Stagecoach, because you see an enormous number of big head close-ups where Wayne is kept in the scene by reacting shots. He looks up, he looks over, he reacts. And this is the most unique thing about the movies, the reaction shot. No dialogue, just the look, which can speak volumes. And Ford really gives him the star treatment in that area by keeping that character alive in every possible situation, by going to see what he's thinking, how he's reacting. That made him a star.
What happened to that boy whose arm I fixed?
He was murdered.
I was introduced to Wayne on the set of Howard Hawks' El Dorado, which I was watching. And he was like a big kid, you know. He was like a gigantic 10-year-old. He was very garrulous, very talkative, very fidgety, always moving, twirling his six-shooter or cocking his rifle. Never went to the trailer between shots. He's always on the set. Loved Hawks. Hawks loved to have him around. We spent 2 hours talking about movies when I first met him, just one anecdote after another, and I'd ask him about this or that, and he'd tell me things. Then when he was finally called to do the shot, he said, "Jesus, great talking about pictures. Nobody wants to talk to me about anything but politics and cancer." And he loved talking about pictures, and that's one of the things that we struck it off that way. He was one of the most disarming people I've ever met, and he was just charming without trying to be. He was just like a big kid, really. He was just delightful. I asked Wayne about Stagecoach, and at one point he said that Ford had asked him after he saw the dailies for the first time, "What'd you think of yourself?" And Wayne said, "Oh, just playing you, you know what that is." What did he mean by playing you? Well, he meant that the character that Wayne played in that was the kind of character that Ford looked up to, that Ford was interested in. The outsider, the loner, the good bad man, so to speak. Ford definitely shaped that performance by what he let Wayne do and what he chose not to let him do. Ford knew what he wanted. Ford cut in the camera. He knew it on Stagecoach, and he knew it on Cheyenne Autumn, made many years later. He was telling the story he had it in his head before he shot it. That's virtually disappeared today. Nobody does that. I saw Ford sitting next to the camera, and he said, "That's enough of that," and he put his hand over the lens. He was in charge. He was a leader, and he knew what he wanted, and he got what he wanted. And everybody knew that he wanted to get it on the first or second take, and so the actors were all geared up, and he got it on the first or second take, usually. And why? Freshness. It keeps it fresh. As he once said to me, he says, "I always had an eye for composition. I don't know where I got it from, but I always had it." That's an understatement. Stagecoach is full of extraordinary shots, like that long, dark hallway in that place they stop. The way he sets those scenes up there, and the way he lights it. Orson Welles, when he was making Citizen Kane, his first film, he wanted to run a well-made film with every member of the crew, so he could discuss one film that was a well-made film, and he chose Stagecoach, and he ran it 39 times. And if you look, you'll see ceiling pieces in Stagecoach, which they think, people have said that Orson invented ceiling pieces. Well, Ford had it long before Orson, and you can see it in Stagecoach. He learned a lot from Griffith about the use of close-up and the use of indirection. There's a famous scene when the John Carradine character is going to shoot the pregnant woman rather than have her be caught by the Indians, and all you see is the hand come in, and then bang, and that's a Griffith moment. It's fascinating that the whole picture builds, despite this extraordinary Indian chase, which is one of the great chases. It's not the climax of the picture. You'd think it would be the end of the movie. And he does a whole long sequence, follows that, with this showdown, this shootout, which is the almost obligatory Western shootout. But he dispatches it. The actual shootout is very quick. Again, Ford was nothing if not perverse. He would go against the grain. He would do it differently than you expected. He would not go to a close-up when you expected it, and he would go to a close-up when you didn't expect it. He would not go to a reverse angle unless you weren't expecting it. I mean, he was unpredictable. Ford picked on everybody. And if he liked you, he'd pick on you probably even more. He made life difficult for Duke on Stagecoach, but he also made it easy for him when, as Wayne said, when there was a difficult scene to do, he'd treat you like a baby. when there was a sort of a not important scene, he might pick on you. It's a way of keeping you on your toes. John Ford was not an easy person to interview, but he kind of liked me, and somehow we hit it off, and he would give me a hard time, but he'd answer the question sometimes. He came to like me, I guess. He tolerated me in a way, you know. Jesus Christ, Bogdanovich, is that all you can do is ask questions? Have you never even heard of the declarative sentence? And that was sort of a calm way of talking that he had. You know, he was getting on, and I think in a way it was flattering to him, a young guy. I was quite young. When I met him, I was 24, and he was 69. I think it was flattering that a young guy knew his stuff so well, and enough to ask him a lot of questions that sometimes irritated him, and other times, you know, amused him. One time, we were shooting Cheyenne Autumn, and I was standing next to him, and this stunt rider came riding down the mountain, stopped just a few feet from the camera, jumped off the horse. Before the horse actually stopped, he landed on his feet and delivered a message. Ford said, "That's well," that meant print. And he turned to me, and he said, "How about that?" And now, you know, I didn't know what to say. I just a jerk standing there, and John Ford turns to me and says, "What about that?" So I said something inane like, "It looked difficult." He looked so disgusted with me that, you know, I just wanted to sink. He said, "Yeah, I'd say it was difficult, yeah. I'd say it was very difficult." And then he walked away, disgusted. So I went miles away from him. I just went nowhere near him for the next couple hours. And suddenly, another shot happened where somebody came riding down or whatever. And I hear Ford, "Bogdanovich!" I'm running over to him. "Yes, Mr. Ford. Yes, Mr. Ford. How about that? That looked difficult to you?" I said, "Yes, Mr. Ford." So for the next few days, every time there was a shot, he said, "That looked difficult?" That was Ford. It was extraordinary to see this frail, very thin, old man, 69, handle 600 people and numberless horses and wagons, and he was in charge. There was nobody else that was anywhere near in charge. He was the boss. And now Cheyenne Autumn isn't as good a film as Stagecoach. It's color and widescreen, and it's got a lot of great stuff in it, but it doesn't have the structure that the sort of perfect structure the Stagecoach has. And there's a kind of extraordinary gusto to Stagecoach, because it was the first time he revisited the Western genre, which clearly he loved, because he returned to it more and more often as the years went by. It was his mythology, it was his American mythology that he really had the greatest hand in creating.